The year 1945 marked the end of the devastating global conflict known as World War II, but it also marked the beginning of a new and tense chapter in world history. After the war, the United States emerged as one of the most powerful nations on Earth. Its economy was strong, its military was unmatched, and its influence spread across Europe and Asia. At the same time, another powerful nation, the Soviet Union, rose as a rival superpower. Although these two nations had been allies against Nazi Germany during the war, their political systems and ideologies were completely different. The United States believed in democracy and capitalism, while the Soviet Union supported communism and a centralized political system. This deep ideological divide created suspicion and competition between the two powers. Over time, this rivalry became known as the Cold War, a conflict that lasted from the mid-1940s until 1991. Unlike traditional wars, the Cold War was not fought through direct battles between American and Soviet troops. Instead, it involved political pressure, economic competition, military alliances, technological rivalry, and proxy wars around the world. Both nations tried to expand their influence while preventing the other side from gaining power. In the late 1940s, the United States became increasingly concerned about the spread of communism in Europe and other regions. American leaders believed that if communism continued to expand, democratic governments might collapse. In response to this concern, the United States worked to strengthen alliances with democratic countries. One of the most important steps occurred in 1949 with the creation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, commonly known as NATO. NATO was a military alliance formed between the United States, Canada, and several Western European countries. The alliance was based on a simple but powerful principle: if one member nation were attacked, all other members would come to its defense. This agreement created a strong defensive partnership designed to prevent Soviet expansion in Europe. The Soviet Union viewed NATO as a threat and responded by strengthening its own influence over Eastern European countries. As a result, the world became increasingly divided into two powerful political and military blocs. The tensions of the Cold War soon spread beyond Europe and into Asia. In 1950, a major conflict erupted on the Korean Peninsula, leading to what is known as the Korean War. Korea had been divided into two parts after World War II. North Korea adopted a communist government supported by the Soviet Union and China, while South Korea established a democratic government supported by the United States and its allies. In June 1950, North Korean forces crossed the border and invaded South Korea in an attempt to unite the peninsula under communist rule. The United States quickly responded by sending military forces as part of a United Nations coalition to defend South Korea. The war became extremely intense, with large-scale battles, heavy casualties, and rapid changes in territory. Chinese forces eventually joined the conflict in support of North Korea, making the war even more dangerous and complex. After 3 years of fighting, the war ended in 1953 with an armistice agreement. Although the fighting stopped, Korea remained divided into two nations, North Korea and South Korea, separated by a heavily fortified border. The Korean War demonstrated how Cold War rivalries could lead to real military conflicts even without direct war between the United States and the Soviet Union. Another major conflict influenced by Cold War tensions occurred in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War, which lasted from the mid-1950s until 1975. Vietnam had also been divided into two regions. North Vietnam was led by a communist government, while South Vietnam was supported by the United States and its allies. American leaders feared that if South Vietnam fell to communism, other countries in Southeast Asia might follow, a theory known as the domino effect. Because of this fear, the United States gradually increased its military involvement in Vietnam during the 1960s. At its peak, hundreds of thousands of American soldiers were fighting in the region. The war was extremely difficult, involving jungle warfare, guerrilla tactics, and heavy bombing campaigns. It also became highly controversial within the United States, as many citizens began to question the purpose and cost of the war. Large protests and demonstrations took place across American cities and university campuses. After years of conflict and growing political pressure at home, the United States began withdrawing its troops in the early 1970s. In 1975, North Vietnamese forces captured the capital of South Vietnam, leading to the reunification of the country under communist rule. The Vietnam War left a lasting impact on American society, politics, and foreign policy. While military conflicts were a major part of the Cold War, The rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union also extended into science and technology. One of the most exciting and dramatic competitions of the era was the space race. Both superpowers wanted to prove that their technology, education systems, and scientific abilities were superior. The competition began in 1957 when the Soviet Union launched the world's first artificial satellite, Sputnik, into orbit around Earth. This achievement shocked the United States and created fears that the Soviet Union might be ahead in missile technology and scientific development. In response, the United States greatly expanded its investment in science education, engineering programs, and space exploration. The U.S. government established the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, known as NASA, to lead the nation's space program. Throughout the late 1950s and 1960s, both countries launched satellites, sent astronauts and cosmonauts into space, and developed increasingly powerful rockets. The competition reached its most dramatic moment during the Apollo program. In 1961, American President John F. Kennedy announced an ambitious goal to land a human being on the moon before the end of the decade. After years of research, testing, and technological innovation, the United States achieved this remarkable objective in 1969 during the Apollo 11 moon landing. On July 20, 1969, astronaut Neil Armstrong stepped onto the lunar surface and became the first human being to walk on the moon. As millions of people watched the event on television around the world, Armstrong delivered the famous words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." The moon landing represented a historic victory for the United States in the space race and demonstrated the incredible power of human innovation and scientific progress. Throughout the Cold War era, the rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union influenced politics, economics, and security across the entire globe. Nations often aligned themselves with one side or the other, creating a world divided by ideology and military alliances. Although the superpowers avoided direct large-scale war against each other, the threat of nuclear conflict remained constant. Both nations built massive arsenals of nuclear weapons capable of destroying the planet many times over. This balance of power created a tense situation known as mutually assured destruction, in which neither side could launch a nuclear attack without facing catastrophic retaliation.